We haven't really gotten to this stage yet because our son Trey is 3.5, but we want to start thinking about how do we tell Trey, and soon when Ellis is older, Ellis, our second, about, yeah, you did have another sibling and they're not here with us.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously at 3.5, I don't think, Trey's ready to hear that. But I think we want to start preparing for how do we talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think, what are some good tips for parents to talk to their kids about child loss, even if that is someone who's has a 3-year-old and they, have a baby who dies? How do we go about talking to our kids about this in a way that they can understand for whatever developmental age that they're at, and also in a way that's still honest and not holding back what's true?
I think it's important to say at the outset that it's an extremely difficult topic to discuss. There's so many women that are just walking through extreme pain that they can't even really explain or describe to people. And everyone's experience is so personal and so unique that I think, as I was saying earlier, it's normal to question God. It's normal to feel angry and depressed and anxious and hopeless. And so the last thing that I would want to do in any of this is to put a Band-Aid on a broken arm, so to speak. But I can say to every woman who's lost a baby with 100% certainty that regardless of how you might be feeling towards God in the midst of your loss, He is full of compassion for you, full of love for you. And even if you feel like you're in a season of doubting that, it doesn't change the truth of it. So God weeps alongside of us. I mean, we see that Jesus wept at the grave of Lazarus. He was willing to allow himself to go through that experience to accomplish a greater good. And if that's true for God's story, then it's absolutely true for our stories as well. And the reason I feel like it's important to start with that foundation is because our emotions as parents are really the driving force for our children's emotions. Kids are super smart, and particularly when it comes to the emotions of their parents. So if you're sad, they will be sad. If you're angry, they will be angry. If you're feeling anxious, guess what? They're going to feel anxious. And they're kind of like little mirrors, so to speak. A couple little stories to illustrate that. My mom once told me that she was working in an elementary school during the 9/11 terrorist attacks. And she was working with kindergarten and first graders. And the day after the attacks happened, she was on bus duty and she was watching these kids get off the bus. And some of the kids were getting off like totally fine, like nothing had happened. Everything was totally normal. And there were other kids who were just clearly anxious, terrified. And she asked the kids who were very anxious, she said, was mommy watching the TV last night or this morning? And every single one of them said yes. So a 5 and 6-year-old, they have no concept of terrorism. They don't know what that is, but they know that mom is really scared. And so they feel really scared. Another story on a more personal level, when I was driving home from the hospital, visiting my friend who lost her baby, my daughter was 3.5 years old at the time. She was sitting in her car seat and she could see me crying from her car seat. And she didn't say anything. She just started singing that little Daniel Tiger song about feeling sad. It's okay to feel sad sometimes. Little by little, you'll feel better again. And I just remember thinking, she doesn't know why I'm sad, but this is the only weapon against sadness that she can come up with. And it was very meaningful to me at the time from my daughter. But just recognizing kids have, they pick up on all of those kinds of emotions. So that being said, I don't think that we need to completely hide our emotions from our kids. If you're sad, if you're struggling, it's okay for your kids to know that. But we do need to be aware of their age and their stage of life. So toddlers and preschoolers really, they don't have any concept of death. They don't have any concept of life inside the womb. And so particularly if it's a really early miscarriage, and mom isn't showing yet, your child probably isn't going to have any idea what you're saying if you try to explain it to them. So there's a lot of personal preference when it comes to when to tell your children about something like this. But I would say a good rule of thumb is if you have already talked to them about the fact that mom is having a baby and they've gotten excited about it, then, you may want to figure out how to explain that to them, that mom is no longer having a baby. But sometimes, if they're so young that they're just going to forget, then it's okay to not say anything. But I think that it's depending on the age of your children. You could just say something simple like, mommy's baby went to live with Jesus, and we're really sad about that because we wanted him to come and live with us. But we're going to trust that God's going to take really good care of our baby. And you could even take that moment to pray and let your child ask God to take care of your baby. And then you can just kind of step back and marvel at the childlike faith that you'll see. That for kids, that's enough. They don't need long theological explanations. And if they see, okay, mom's trusting God, okay, I can trust God too. And here's some proof of that. So again, if your child's really young, I wouldn't recommend even necessarily saying anything like that. My two older children were both in late elementary school before I told them about my miscarriage. And so my younger two, I think they've heard us talk about it, but I've never had an intentional conversation with them. You as a parent sort of need to gauge whether or not your child's mature enough to handle that kind of information.